to the governor for getting this signed and everyone else who, I believe this was a bipartisan bill, who made this happen. This part of the article too, it says, although research on the direct relationship between vocational education and reduced recidivism is mixed. And for those that might not be in the helping profession, that's essentially they reoffend after release is mixed. Experts agree that stable, skilled employment offers stronger protection against reoffending than low-wage survival jobs.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're talking about too. And this is why anytime you're in the helping profession and you're giving money to helping programs or agencies, you can really, like I said earlier, take whatever stance you want if it's working or not, based off this person's taking advantage of it, this person isn't. But what I really think we're trying to do, Hope, and you can tell me if you disagree with this, is we're really just trying to increase probabilities that people will succeed. Yes. We understand there isn't just one program or one campus or one service that guarantees someone is going to succeed, because a lot of these programs are serving people who's experienced at very young age trauma, poverty, failures, limited education. You know, there's a lot of different factors that go involved. And ultimately, even if somebody had no risk factors at all, they still get to decide if they're going to do the things that lead to their success. They get to make that decision. No program can make that decision for them. You know what I mean? So we have to really say, does this service we're providing, this program we're providing, this policy that we're signing, can it positively impact the probability that this person will be successful? And I know that can be a tough thing for some people who aren't directly connected to the helping profession, because you're like, why am I putting my money there when I empathize with that for sure, because there's certain areas that my tax dollars go to that I don't understand at all. I remember when I first got my check and I looked at my pay stub and I'm like, what is happening here? Why is this going? This is nonsense, right? Without having any real context behind that. Hope, this stood out to me for you because of your experience working in corrections. You want to tell us a little bit about what you do and then your thoughts on this recently signed bill?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do, I actually am the founder of Cultivating Hope Training and Consulting. So I travel around the United States and I train agencies from workforce, corrections, reentry, social services, any kind of social work. I train primarily in trauma-informed care and resiliency. As a part of that, I also go into prisons, and then I work with organizations that go into prisons to give my curriculum, which is Beyond the Barbed Wire, which is to really cultivate resiliency and character within those individuals who are going to be returning citizens, so that when they come back to the community, that they have been developing those resiliency skills. They have been developing those characteristics that help them overcome adversity and challenges. So when I look at this bill, being on the inside of the prisons and being on the inside of the organizations that work with returning citizens, I think it's phenomenal. And if you're out there listening and you don't know anything about reentry or corrections beyond the barbed wire, I think it'd be good to really dive in a little bit, because each of our individuals in corrections, justice impacted, when they go into their facilities, unless they have a life sentence, and then even sometimes when they do, they're coming back to the community. They might be in your community or a neighboring community, but they're coming back. It is important, it is key that they have skills to make them ready, and not just one skill. So I think when I look at this bill and I think of skills that are going to help these individuals get a job, keep a job, maintain a job, it's going to eliminate some of those risk factors. It's not the only answer, but it is a solid answer. It is a big answer to eliminate some of those risk factors, to reduce recidivism, and to increase success for those justice impacted individuals. And Curtis, you said earlier when we were talking that whether somebody commits a crime or does not commit a crime, it affects us. So when we are releasing justice impacted individuals back into the community, the more tools, the more support, the more education and understanding that we can wrap around them, the more successful they're going to be. So in essence, the more successful our communities are going to be and the more safe our neighborhoods are going to be, because with those skills, they can come back and be a contributing member of society with those risk factors being removed, and then those generations that come from them to continue with higher levels of protective factors. So I think it's phenomenal. It's one of those things to where it's not all of the answers, but it is one of the biggest answers, because poverty is a huge risk factor.
And again, I think when we're talking about common ground and working towards solutions, everyone can agree you working minimum wage or a little bit above minimum wage is not sustainable. No. It's just not. And that's not even taking into account what's going on with automation and AI and where we're heading, right? You want to give people jobs that not only offer high wages, but offer a chance for upward mobility so they can continue to earn more. And I think this bill does a really, at least it increases the probability that they can be on that trajectory, which is what we're trying to do.
And I'll give you a couple examples, Curtis. So today's Friday. So 2 days ago, I went out to the prison and I hosted a graduation for Beyond the Barbed Wire. And at the end of the graduation, I have two men, returning citizens. So one is going to be released in the next year. The other is going to be released in 2027. And both of them are going to be in their mid to high 60s once they're released. One has been in, he'll be in 15 years, which is a good amount of time to be away from the workforce. The other has been in since he was a teenager of 15 or 16 years old. So both of them asked, Ms. Hope, what am I going to do when I go home? How am I going to take care of myself? And so they are concerned. They're worried. They want to be contributing members of society. They have dreams and they have goals. And at this time, this particular prison just doesn't have the training in place to give them those certifications. So, of course, I've been working with them a little bit on some other avenues to where they can make an income and help take care of themselves. But this is a common example. This is not just one example. This is a common example of what's happening. People are going into the prisons. They are getting rehabilitated. They are ready to come out and be contributing good members of society, but do they have the tools for that? So giving them the tools, a tool, like you said, this is not every answer. It is one of the answers, but giving them a tool to where they can feel empowered and be successful is tremendously important. It's something that needs to be in every single prison, and not just in the last 90 days when they're going to return home. From the moment somebody goes into prison, there needs to be some kind of transition plan to help make them ready for when they come out. Because I know a lot of people that aren't familiar with corrections and reentry. Prison is not meant to be forever for every individual. It is a period of time. So when they come out, they need to have tools that can help them and help their families. And when those tools are present, then we see success stories. We're surrounded by success stories when we see that those tools were present.
Yeah, well said. And that reminds me, with our juvenile justice days, is that you would say at the end of the young person completing the program, did you have a discharge planning conference? Which is, it sounds nice, right? But in reality, what we learned is discharge planning has to start at intake. As soon as you meet that person, you're planning for their ultimate discharge and setting them up for success on that. If you're only talking about that right at the end, which I'm old enough to remember where we would have these meetings and we talking about persons coming back to the community and they'd be like, where are they going to school? I don't know. It's like, what are you talking about? So like, we're just going to, you were just going to throw them out there and hope it works. In this situation, we're not increasing the probability of success. This is just what we want to do. You can't fix people. You can't change people as badly as you want. You might want to fix people. You can't. You can fix yourself. Spoiler alert, you can do that. You can change yourself, but you can't fix or change somebody else. But you can absolutely provide support, services that increase the probability that they can make something of themselves and then of their family and then feel good about themselves, and that's what these these programs are doing. And with that note, Hope, if we can transition to one of our passion topics here on the juvenile justice side. So this is some more good news. Hope this is specifically out of Florida, related to the juvenile justice side. A bill is headed to the governor's desk, promises to keep children on the right path. Florida lawmakers passed legislation that prioritizes early intervention, ensuring at-risk youth receive the support that they need. This bill aims to improve agency coordination with a focus on promoting education, strengthening families, and preventing youth from being involved in criminal behavior. So, like with any article, it doesn't really get the meats and potatoes there for you to say, okay, what does that mean? So let's talk about what this means with this new bill. And I'm not sure, the projections are that the governor is going to sign it. I don't know if at this moment he did sign it, but let's talk about what some of this stuff this new bill does with juvenile justice, Hope, and let me get your thoughts on it. The main thing it does, one of the first things, is it refocuses on prevention over punishment. So when we start identifying some risk factors, whether a child is truant, whether they have poor grades or some minor behavior issues, instead of immediately going with the hammer, it's more about going with the wraparound supports to try to help them and prevent them from entering the system in the first place. So one example of that is they're going to put some new limits on secure detentions, whereas previously, let's say a young person has an issue of truancy and they catch them, and they say officers catch them outside of school and they should be in school. Instead of that young person potentially going to secure detention for a prolonged period of time, this law now limits how long they can be in detention for what they call status offenses, which a status offense, again, would be like truancy or running away. With the idea here is, let's not just give you a sentence or a punishment for this behavior. Let's find out if there are some underlying factors or some supports that can help this behavior, with the idea of, we know that if we can keep you out of the justice system, that's better for everybody. Because as you know, once you get in it, there tends to be a little bit of a cycle there where you can end up staying in it for a long time. So initial thoughts on those two elements, focusing on prevention over punishment, and then some limits on those secure detention stays.
Well, I think that we can all agree, or anybody with a history and understanding. I've been in juvenile justice now, April, I believe, made 24 years. So that's quite a long time. And I've always thought that prevention trumps intervention. Now, we do need intervention. There are several stages that we can help people. One of those is intervention. But if we can reach people before the problem happens and prevent the problem, then that is key. So I really like that. That is something that I think goes beyond putting a Band-Aid on something. It goes to the front end to identify some of these factors, to identify the youth that need problems, to identify the gaps. Sometimes these young people that enter into the juvenile justice system, a lot of times, not just sometimes, a lot of times they are entering into the justice system because of a gap that was in place, because of some kind of support or service that was not there. It was not provided at the front end. Therefore, because there was a gap, they ended up entering into the juvenile justice system. And many times, once a young person enters into the juvenile justice system, not every time, but sometimes, that can lead to the adult justice system. So if we can hit stuff on the front end and change lives there, and I would say save lives, we're not just touching that one life. We're touching every single life that life touches. So I think it's phenomenal. And I'd like to see how it plays out. I'd like to see more details on it. And those are my initial thoughts on it. I think it's a really great idea. And I just want to know more about how it's going to roll out, how it's going to be implemented, what type of programming is going to be developed, what kind of follow through. And then, of course, we all like the word fidelity. What kind of fidelity measures are going to be put in place to make sure that we're not just checking boxes, because checking boxes is powerless. Let's make sure that we are getting the job done, but also empowering our young people while we are preventing these measures. So that's what I have to say about it, Curtis. I think it's a great bill, and I'd actually like to be part of that in some capacity.
Yeah, same here. I think it's definitely a good start. And this is a good example too when we're talking solutions, is this really seems like a common sense solution, which is a great idea. And now it's about the execution of it. There are a couple other things in this bill I think are very good. They have another element of it where contempt of court rules are tightened. So kids that are found in contempt for skipping court, they can't be detained indefinitely. So we know this is a big thing, right? Because there's a lot of factors that can go into missing your court date, whether it's communication, not being communicated timely or effectively from whoever's involved in that case. It could be a transportation issue. It could be life gets in the way issue. Like there's a lot of things. So what this bill does is now kids can't just, oh, you missed court, go put out a warrant. They're going to be held indefinitely. There's clear limits to due process protections. Another really important element of this is it says courts must coordinate with DCF, DJJ, and the Agency for Persons with Disabilities when making placements. So they're essentially mandating communication and coordination and collaboration, which it's tough that we have to say you better do this when it comes to collaboration, because you would think that would be something that we'd want to do. But I'm glad we are doing it, because Florida especially tends to be very resource rich, yet have trouble communicating amongst each other and bridging the gap on how our services connect to your services. So I definitely think that's an area we can work on. And I do want to give a shout out to reading a little bit more about this. The representatives worked alongside the Department of Juvenile Justice to get this bill done. They worked with them all the way up until the end, which is a really good sign that DJJ is on the forefront of saying, hey, we need to do these things to try to prevent kids from getting in our system, right? So I'm loving that. And then it redefines how families can access voluntary family services. So there's more of an emphasis on family involvement with this bill as well, in addition to some early truancy intervention. So virtual meetings, in-person meetings with parents when they start noticing a pattern of missing school, which is being proactive instead of reactive, especially with our population, is just so important. Now, what I hope, as someone who's a son of a teacher, is that we create space or positions or additional supports in the school that they can do this effectively, right? Because I know teachers want to know why their kids aren't there and want their kids to be in school. So I don't think it's a 1-2 thing. It's, do they have the resources to do that? So I'm hoping that we'll also couple these new expectations with those resources to allow them to be successful in this. But overall, I feel like this bill is a pretty positive sign. Hope, any final thoughts on this before we move on to the last part?
No, I think it adds levels of accountability, not just to the young people, but also to the family, to the programs. We do have a lot of resources in Florida, but a lot of resources don't know about the other resources that are out there. So making that communication necessary is going to be another element that fills the gap. And I don't just believe, I know that that's going to make a difference. So I think this is a positive move forward in not just reducing recidivism for young people, but reducing young people ever entering the justice system in general. And my last thought on that is getting families involved and doing, engaging families. I don't know the data, but let's just say it's 90% of young people that do gear toward the justice system. A lot of times the families need some resources. They need some support. It starts there. And if the families can be supported in some way to be empowered, then that's also going to help on the front end, which is going to reduce recidivism and incarceration in general on the back end. In fact, Curtis, I don't know, you probably know this, but one of the most determining factors when prisons are being built is they take a look at reading levels for third grade. And if reading levels are low, that is how states determine how many prisons they're going to build by the time that those third graders get to the age of incarceration. So starting early, starting on the front end is something that is very important in so many ways. Again, it's not the only answer, but it is one of the most solid answers, and it's one tool that we can put out there to help prevent what we are seeing in today's society.
Yeah, and I just love when law is passed or legislation is passed that helps people help people better.
Yes.
Obviously you want these programs and these agencies to take initiative and do these things, but when they have laws to lean on, I think that can go a long way. So props to Florida for passing some really good legislation in the spirit of helping others.